Dad, we are back. Lessons learned live. And it's just good to be back, Dad. How are you tonight?
Man, I am absolutely wonderful. Had a magnificent day at church today in the virtual worship.
I
How
love
about
it.
yourself?
Same for us. Attended all of our virtual services today and had a great time. But I'm excited today because you and I are going to have a different kind of conversation today. And
Okay.
some of what we'll talk about is the learning that we've done from others in this whole
Okay.
idea of mentoring. And today will also be a kind of memorial conversation in memory of
Okay.
one of our special mentors that we will talk about. But I just want to give our folks a moment to come in. Hey, everybody, once you come in, just say hello to us, please. We want to speak to you, and we're just glad that you're going to be here with us tonight. Tonight's conversation is going to be impactful for all of our lives because we're all going to gain some nuggets from these lessons that we have learned that we want to share with you. Please say hello to us in the comment section. If you will, just even go ahead and share. And let's get some folks in tonight there. I'm excited about this conversation. And I just want to go ahead and kick off because we'll only be on for an hour, but this hour is going to be filled with principles and lessons that we have learned. And I want to just kick it right off there because there is something powerful and limitless about the reality and the need for mentors in life. And you taught me early, and I so appreciate it, that you need help from somebody for everything you do. For us, we do ministry. God's called us to ministry, but even in the way you save your money, even in the way you treat people, even in the way you dress, your style, the way you speak to people, all of that has a lot to do with somebody says you look good in the comment section, Dr. Harvey. She says it's the glasses for me.
Is it my glasses or is it their glasses?
I love it. And so there, I'm excited to share. And everybody, once you come in again, please speak to us. Say hello in the comment section. We see Brother Grantham, Sister Burgess. Thank you all and others who are coming in. Just say hello to us. But Dad, there is something so powerful about the exchange of information. Pastor Norman Scott, hello. There's something so powerful about the exchange of information and knowledge one to another. And I've shared with some people that I now mentor that mentorship and shared knowledge and wisdom, a lot of times we can learn through people's experience if we're willing to. And that's something that I'm really proud of. So, Dad, can you speak to first the value of mentorship? We're going to talk about some who's, we're going to talk about some what's, but for now, let's start with the overarching principle of just what mentorship is and its value. Can you speak to that, Dad?
Well, first of all, it's good to be with you again, Ricky Jr. I'm glad to be here. Glad to see you. You look good. You don't look like what you've been through. COVID-19. So I'm glad to have you here with a well-healed body. So, Rick, I think when it comes down to the scripture, Proverbs 22:6, when it says, train up a child in the way that he or she should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from his training. I think that particular verse, along with verses that talks about old men dream dreams and young men see visions. When you look in the Bible and you see where there was an Elijah and an Elijah, there was a Moses and a Solomon, it was just different ones who were guiding each other. And so when you think about training up a child, I think one of the things that's happening today is, and when I say young preachers, I'm not against young preachers at all, because once upon a time, believe it or not, I was one. But I was kind of like, I think young preachers years ago were kind of like Paul. When I was a child, I thought as a child, I understood as a child, and I saw myself as a child. And so in my day, so to speak, and my days dates back to 35 years ago when I started preaching, I saw myself as a child preacher. And I saw other men like Oris Mays, like Kenneth Whalum, like Jasper Williams. I saw them as men. In other words, I didn't see myself as an equal to.
Sure.
And therefore, I saw myself in a position to be able to learn, to be able to glean. And so you asked about the value of mentorship, and we're going to keep this with the preaching, is priceless.
Wow.
It's priceless. And so let me tell you some things that your dad learned from my mentors. I learned how to walk into a church by watching how my mentors walked into a church. I learned how to mount the pulpit. A lot of young preachers think that you just got to learn how to preach. You got to learn what to do before the preaching even starts.
Wow.
And so, and we're going to be talking about this tonight. So it's priceless what you get from developing relationships with mentors. Rick, one of the things people will ask is, how do you get mentors? How do you get mentors? And do I just go out and tell somebody I want you to be my mentor? It really doesn't happen like that.
No.
It doesn't happen like that. You leap into the hearts. You leap into the hearts. You know, the old people said that from the heart reaches the heart. Your mentor-mentee relationship, I believe it's a divine relationship.
Sure.
I was sharing with Pastor Keith Robinson tonight. We were talking about mentorships and mentoring and different things. And I was sharing with my mentors were persons that God just put us together, and all of them were not necessarily people who were like Kenneth Whalum. Kenneth Whalum, one of the biggest Baptist pastors ever to pastor a church. We met on opposing grounds.
Sure.
But in our opposing positions, he saw me in him. And rather than getting mad with me because of my stupidity, he reached and got me. And me not being stubborn because of my stupidity.
And so I want to park there for a moment, because when it comes to getting what you need from the people who have it, I think you just gave a sort of formula for how that can happen. All of us need something, and all of us have something. Mm-hmm. And so as it relates to giving what we have to somebody, we have to be open to see the needs of somebody else. Mm-hmm. And then as it relates to getting what we need that somebody else already has, we have to be humble in the reality that nobody knows everything. And I can speak as a new pastor, as a younger preacher in my ministry, who has to acknowledge that if we are not humble, even as the Lord gives us growth and grace to advance, if we are not humble to learn from somebody else, you are limited by what you're unwilling to learn. And I don't think we highlight enough, Dad, how we limit ourselves by our unwillingness to learn from somebody else. Learning is not a ding on your person. As a matter of fact, to the contrary, It is a thing if you're unwilling to learn. And I think the information age has our minds so grand and so arrogant that we're afraid to learn from each other, when in fact, all of us have to learn from somebody. And I think that's the big piece. I'm so glad you mentioned that somebody saw, even from Pastor Whalum saw, even from opposing opinions, that there was a potential in you to learn something that he already understood. And I think we're missing that these days for sure.
So one of the things that the young preacher must have is aspirations. You gotta want to be better than you are today.
Yeah.
You gotta want to be bigger than you are today. You gotta want to be broader than you are today. And the best way to get where you're trying to go is to attach yourself to someone who is where you want to be. Oprah said it once. She says, stay away from people who are in the place now that you don't want to be in.
Wow.
Stay away from the people who are in the place that you don't want to be. And so, Dad always wanted to be a Kenneth Whalum. Dad wanted to be and we'll talk about Reverend James Netters in a few minutes, but Dad wanted to be, I guess you would call it, a successful preacher. And Reverend Billy Cowles told St. Paul and told me in 1989 that I was not to be a backyard preacher.
Wow.
And he told me that I was not a backyard preacher.
Yeah.
I didn't have to have backyard preacher defined for me.
Sure.
I just knew that I just never wanted to be called a backyard preacher.
Whatever.
When he said, don't be a backyard preacher, I was satisfied with not being a backyard preacher. And so what I did was I attached myself to people. And many of the people who I attached myself to were attached to other people. Dr. Billy Cowles was attached to Jesse Jackson. Oris Mays was attached to Clay Evans, and just one after another. And everywhere you went, you learned two things. You learned what you wanted to do and how to do it. And then you learned some things that you did not want to do, and you learned not to do some things.
I think that's important because sometimes we may misconstrue the mentor-mentee relationship to be that somebody is just giving you the answers to all of your questions. Sometimes it's not always that. Oftentimes it's you're learning sometimes what to do and other times what not to do. But I think it's interesting, particularly from the context of people who are in ministry, because we're often looked to for answers and to have a word and to have advice that is sometimes spiritual, sometimes practical. But I think it's interesting because we who pour need to be poured into. And a lot of times we go empty, not as a result always of sinful choices, not always because we've made poor decisions, but sometimes we run empty because we don't prioritize the need for us to be poured into as well. And I think that's an interesting thing, even as we segue. Go ahead.
So let me say this. I want to get up off of the young preachers now and get into the guys my age and older. Wow, there are a lot of guys, young preachers, who would love to have a mentor, would love to be connected to somebody who is connected. One of the things that I see, I've kind of said how I feel about young preachers not feeling that aspiration, don't have the drive, don't go around the older preachers like we did. But the problem with the older preachers now, when I say old, I don't mean those on canes. I mean guys my age.
Sure.
I'm 56 years old. A lot of guys now want, rather than have mentees that they pour into, they take young preachers and make them flunkies, as opposed to pouring into. And one of the things that you guys are not willing to do, and you're not going to do it, and you should not do, is be flunkies.
Yeah.
I was never the water boy. I was never the and I think some of my peers may disagree with me right here, but I was never the what you call this thing, the book satchel carrier. I didn't carry the book. I didn't wipe the sweat, because my mentors were secure enough to wipe their own sweat. My mentors could carry their own Bibles. And so they didn't have me there wiping their sweat, carrying their Bibles, warming the car. We all got in cold cars. We all got in hot cars. We all got in the cabs together. We all got on the airplanes together. We all either rode first class or we were all in coach. And so when I showed up with the Oris Mays and the Netters and the Billy Cows and the Buns and the Southalls and the R.W. McClendons, they didn't say, there is McClendon and his flunkies. They said, there they are.
Right.
Because they were making me to become just like them in my own way. And so one of the problems I have with young preachers now, with senior pastors, you got guys, I mean, hell, how heavy is an iPad? How heavy is an iPad that somebody's got to carry your iPad? You know, do you not have a handkerchief for yourself? That you got, that you preaching that hard that somebody got to stand, and I hate to see it. And I don't allow it. And I don't allow it in our church. And you know how I feel about young preachers being bodyguards. Hell, if I need a bodyguard and we're in the same place, you need one too. If it's dangerous for me to be in this place and you with me, it's dangerous for you. So we need somebody to protect both of us. So I was never the protector. I was never the bodyguard. I was never the water boy. I was never the Bible toter. And so we got a problem on both ends. It's not just young preachers. It's not just young preachers.
Yeah. And I think, though, also people, I look at it even that idea of quid pro quo. And I look at how people will often subject themselves to that kind of treatment because they think that is the way to receive from somebody's pour. But the pour, P-O-U-R, that comes out of one life into another does not require me to be subservient to you.
Right.
Now, I was raised by you to be a servant to the leader, but that servant nature does not look like me being subservient, me being, in your words, a flunky. And I think I so hate to see people play themselves like that, because nobody can make you do that, you know. And a lot of times people think that they're getting something out of that, and I hate to see it as well. But I will say that there is a difference between being a servant and being subservient.
Right.
And and I think that is what we are missing, because so many people want, it's an optic. And I think that's the danger, because real mentorship more often than not happens in private.
Right.
It is the private correction. It is the private rebuke. It is, it may be public love, but you know what I'm saying? It's the private relationship. And I think that so often people who have small personalities and big egos try to make themselves look larger than life by having 10 or 15 people carry their Bible. And, you know, even as a youth pastor, even at the local church that I serve, I serve our senior pastor and nobody can beat me doing it. I've never wiped sweat off his brow. I've never carried his Bible. You know what I'm saying? Because service to someone who has what you need is so much bigger than those small, silly things.
By the same token, in no wise are we too good. If you need sweat, wipe.
Yes.
We wipe. If you need this done for you, we do that. Rick, with that being said, I want to shift us into who are some of our mentors.
Yeah.
And then possibly we can talk about mentees. But so let's talk about you right quick. Who have been some of your mentors, and how has your ministry been affected by mentorship?
Honestly, I have to first, even in this kind of conversation, when I think mentors and how I'm becoming who I think God has always intended me to be, I have to refer to you, Dad. Your example, your advice, some of which I choose to take, some of which I choose to leave on the table, but it is always, it has so shaped who I am as a person and a preacher. And it has shaped my understanding of mentorship in a very high way, because I'll tell you that the voice, it's taught me that the voices that we allow to speak into our lives as preachers literally shape who we are. And so your voice has just so shaped the way, my perception of the world. And you have this level of realism that is so confrontational to the pie in the sky kind of perspective on life. And so that is something that I have highly gleaned from you. I'm just a realist. It just is what it is. There is real life in church. There is real, the church is in the world. We are not so separate from the world in our reality that we don't have world problems even in the church, and so that's a huge, even the way I speak, the way that I stand, the way that I interact with people is so influenced definitely by you. And then to even name you as a mentor, I followed that up immediately with one of your friends and president of CRCDS while we were there, Dr. Marvin McMickle's advice and teaching on preaching. I went to a session that he did with E.L. Branch just this last week on Zoom. And just his approach to preaching has so shaped the way that I preach, my appreciation for scripture. One of the main things he taught us in seminary in his preaching class was the better you know the Bible, the better preacher you will be. And that's very similar to the advice that you gave me, Dad. I don't even know that you remember, but you advised me, you taught me that my authority in my ministry is scripture. And so that between you and Dr. McMickle, my preaching is laden with scripture. No, I'm not going Genesis to Revelation you, but I'm going to prove my point, not just with anecdotal jokes and illustrations, but in the Holy Scripture. And then lastly, I will name my current senior pastor, Robert Turner, who I serve under here in Columbia, Maryland. And his approach to leadership has so shaped me. And it's really interesting, even in our staff meetings, he'll call me after a staff meeting because I got this realism and this straight shooter kind of personality from you, Dad. And he'll call me after a staff meeting and say, now, Rick, you got that done, but you didn't have to necessarily get it done like that, right? And so now that I have a strong foundation in content, now I'm learning how to approach different contexts.
Mhm.
And so when I think my top 3 mentors, I have to name you, I have to name Dr. McMickle. And at this part of my life, one of my key mentors is Robert Turner, who I actually serve. And what I appreciate is, as a staff pastor, that I can have the kind of personal relationship with the senior pastor in my church, because, Dad, it is not guaranteed. I know folks who work for churches right now who cannot stand their senior leadership, and sometimes for reasons that may seem legitimate. But so that I'm very thankful for that. So that would be those are 3 key mentors for me, and I want to kind of push along. I want to hear your mentors, and I certainly want to take a chunk of our time to talk about Dr. Netters, who passed today, and then we will shift to even talk about mentees. But Dad, who have been some of your key mentors for ministry in your life?
Okay, so my ministry is so multifaceted that I have multiple mentors who deposited all of these nuggets into me that made me to be who I am today. For example, prayer. Reverend William Bunn in Buffalo is the pastor. He's deceased, and he's the one who taught me how to pray, and the value of prayer in a pastor's life, and how to pray for people when people ask for prayer on the spot.
Yeah.
So in terms of the prayer, it was for Reverend Bunton. Billy Kyles taught me the smoothness, how to be smooth, navigate through easy and get what you want, but do it very smoothly. Jasper Williams Jr., of course, is my mentor for preaching.
Yeah.
Not only for preaching, but for voice and for articulation. That's the one that I watched walk into a place. That's the one I watched mount the pulpit. So when it comes to standing at that sacred desk, that's Jasper Williams, hands down. My roughness came from Kenneth Whalum. Yeah, and you got to be smooth when you need to be smooth.
Yeah.
And then you got to have the guts and the roughness when you need that. And Kenneth Whalum taught me how to be, I would say, successfully rough.
Yeah.
Rough when you need to be, tough when you need to be, say what you mean what you say, and don't scratch and don't bat your eyes. That would be the Kenneth Whalum in me. The shrewdness in ministry would have come from Oris Mays.
Yeah.
And I'll just leave that there, and I won't talk about what shrewd is. But Oris Mays Reverend Oris Mays taught me how to be shrewd, and how to navigate through people who are attacking me. You know, how to make it through the attacks of ministry.
Yeah, sure.
Because you do get attacked. It's not a bed of roses. And we can all make it when the bed is full of roses, but what do you do when the bed is full of thorns?
Right. Right.
And how do you maintain that same level of joy for preaching, joy for driving up in the parking lot, joy for going into a meeting? How do you not lose that joy and not lose that? And Oris Mays would have been the one to teach me that. Reverend Southall, and I'll stop here. Reverend Southall sort of taught me how to navigate between a multicultural type of context, white preachers, Hispanics, and others. He introduced me to that lifestyle with preachers and put me up in the white churches and told me how to not open all of my barrels.
Yeah.
You understand?
Yeah.
And so I think I have multiple mentors in my life, because there are so many facets that have come from me as a result of what's been deposited into me. And
I will say that, to your point, I think it's important to even acknowledge as far as from a mentee perspective, to help shape expectations, that you won't get everything from anybody.
Right.
There is no.
The one that we're going to talk about today is Reverend Netters. If there's anybody who taught me two things, one is kindness, and two is stick to itness.
Yeah,
you got to stick to it. Reverend Netters was the mentor that mentored me in the roughest of times and gave me that stick to itness. So, Rick, you met Reverend Netters.
I remember Reverend Netters for as long as I don't remember meeting Reverend Netters. That's how long Reverend Netters has definitely been in my life. So how did you meet Reverend Netters? Do you remember?
So I went to St. Paul. Rick, it's kind of like I don't ever remember not knowing Reverend Netters.
Sure.
But it had to be certainly in Reverend Netters was bigger than life. So it would probably be when Reverend Netters got to know me, because by the time I came along on the scene, Reverend Netters' name was so big. It was like if you didn't know Reverend Netters, you lied and said you did, because you didn't want anybody to know that you didn't know Reverend Netters. He was big in the corporate world with Memphis Light, Gas, and Water. He was big in the political world with city council. He was big in preaching. He was like Enoch. He just was. So I have always known Reverend Netters, but I became a son mentee to Reverend Netters probably in 1988 or 89 when I was pastoring St. Paul Baptist Church.
Okay. And so who initiated that relationship to make it more than this associate, just associates? Who?
Well, I did, and I'll tell you how. When I was coming to pastor St. Paul, Reverend Netters was also building this, what would be known in Memphis as the first mega church that Memphis would know. And I remember wanting to know Reverend Netters really, really close. And, you know, the Bible says money answers all things.
Yes, sir. In Ecclesiastes.
So one of the things that we did at St. Paul was, because Reverend Netters was building this mega building, I don't know how I got invited to be one of the speakers. I mean, you're talking about on Sunday nights when Frank Ray was the guest, Gilbert L. Patterson was the guest speaker. The biggest that Memphis had were the guest speakers on Sunday nights for Mount Vernon's night services. And I guess the lot just fell on me that they invited me in St. Paul to come and be a Sunday night speaker. And I remember asking St. Paul probably for a month we raised an offering each Sunday. And when we got to Mount Vernon, we had a sizable offering for their building project, just to say, hey, we appreciate what your work has done, your ministry has done for the city. It was the only building at that time that could house T.D. Jakes.
Wow.
It was the only building in the Memphis, only church building that could house T.D. Jakes. And so that was one of the things that we did. And then Reverend Netters invited me to preach. And Reverend Netters had a crying spirit when he was like Jeremiah. And I guess I got it from him. You know, he was like
crying. Let me tell you something. The way you would get on Facebook Live and start crying wears me out. I saw you crying today.
Did I cry today?
You cried today.
And so it just was. He invited me to St. Paul. He invited me to Mount Vernon, and I invited him to St. Paul. And Rick, I think this is what locked us in. When I invited him to St. Paul, when he finally got to St. Paul, I was in trouble. I was in trouble. I was in a storm. I was in a terrible storm at St. Paul. And whereas my church was full at one point, the church had practically emptied. And Reverend Nethers came to preach the church anniversary. There was very few people there, no money raised. The spirit of the church was low. And I had been called during that particular time to be the pastor of Second Baptist Church in Aiken County, South Carolina.
Well, I'm so glad you didn't do that.
And yeah, I had been called to go to Aiken County, South Carolina. And Reverend Nethers came, and I told him how they didn't like me and I didn't like them. They're mad at me and I'm mad at them. And I want to leave because I'm in a storm. And Reverend Nethers told me to meet him at Red Lobster in Whitehaven at that time. And I remember here we go.
I see. I knew it was coming.
And I remember Reverend Nethers grabbed my hand at Red Lobster and he say, "You can't go." I said, "Reverend, they're offering me," I was 27, 28 years old. I said, "They're offering me this amount of money. They're offering me a brand new car." I'd had none of that at St. Paul at that time. "They're offering me this amount of money. They're offering me this." He says, "You can't go." And I said, "But these people are mad at me. These people," he says, "You can't go." I said, "Why?" He says, "Because you're in a storm. And listen to me, young preachers. Listen to me, young preachers." He says, "You're in a storm. And you never leave a church in a storm." I mean, you think I'm about to cry now. I left Red Lobster just tore up because I've got to turn a church down and stay here in this storm. About 2 years later, we invited Reverend Nethers back to St. Paul Church for a church anniversary. Church was packed. Church was full. The momentum was up. The energy was up. They loved me. I loved them. Whatever we were mad about, they forgot about that. I forgot about it. Reverend Nethers came. He brought Mount Vernon. We had a wonderful time, raised a lot of money. And Reverend Nethers said to me, "Meet me at Red Lobster in Whitehaven." Yep. Grabbed my hands again and said, "Now you can leave.
Wow.
You've learned how to master church storms. You've learned how to get through the hard times. You've learned how to handle the storms." He said, "Because wherever you go, there will be tough times. There will be times when they like you and your ratings are up high. And wherever you go, there will be times when the poll is not in your favor." And so I've had a successful 35-year run because, and son, you've been there with me in storms. You've seen storms. But never have I run from a storm because Reverend Nethers taught me how to navigate through storms. And if there's anything I've tried to teach you, it's not just so much about the glory days, but teach you that storms do come.
Yeah.
And E.L. McKinney said, if you can take it, you can make it.
Yeah. I think that is so huge. And it so speaks to what real mentorship can do.
Yeah.
Right. Because you can get self-help, nice advice anywhere from anybody.
Right.
But to have the kind of voice in your life that can give you advice that you don't want.
Right.
That doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
But that is good for you.
Yeah.
I think that so speaks to the power of mentorship. And I so celebrate as really like a secondhand mentee to Dr. Nettles. I so appreciate all of the different nuggets that have been invested in you, because I get that, right? That's how the cycle continues to work, that we receive and freely we give, freely we receive, right? And so I think it's so important for us to be open to the advice that does not feel good, because people, and this is interesting, because remember, mentees are the ones who are where we want to go.
Right.
And they understand something, Pastor Jonathan, that we don't know. And that is that sometimes you got to stay when it hurts.
You got to stay when it hurts.
It takes somebody who's been where you want to go to help you understand that all pain is not bad pain.
Right.
You know, what would we look like if we stopped working out every time we felt soreness?
Pain.
You know what I'm saying? What would our finances be? You know, one thing you teach me is to save until it hurts.
Until it hurts.
Right? And so what would my savings be? What would my future look like if I needed to feel good to accomplish what we got to do in life? So I think that's huge there. I just totally honor the life and the legacy of James Nettles. What a larger than life pastor and person.
And to have had the opportunity to ride in the car with him, stay in hotels with him, preach for him, you know, and him preach for me. Everywhere I've been, he's been there. He was at St. Paul. He was at my installation. He installed me in Tucson. He's been here in Rochester, you know, and here's another thing about Reverend Nettles, Rick, that you may know. I hit a storm in Tucson. And I remember calling Reverend Nettles because I was far past leaving, but I needed a break. And I said to Reverend Nettles, I said, let's go somewhere. And so Reverend Nettles called a friend of ours, Wayne Gator in Boston. And he says, Rick's in a storm, so we're going to come to Boston. And Wayne said, I'm in a storm too, got to get out of Boston. And so we called another friend, Curtis Williams, who we've been talking all day today. And we called Curtis, and he said, and Reverend Nettles said, Rick and Wayne are in storms and they want to get out of town. So we're coming to Detroit. So we're going out of town. Curtis said, I'm in a storm. So he says, my storm is so bad, I can't leave town. Curtis said, my storm is so bad, I can't leave town. He said, but if you all come to Detroit, I'll take care of everything. You all just get here. So we went to Detroit. We stayed at the Embassy Suite, Reverend Nettles and Reverend William Murphy Sr. We were all there together, Reverend McClendon and Rick, Reverend Nettles, and I, and the rest of those guys I named, we were on a boat so big every day, it was like a ship. And I didn't know that Reverend Nettles knew so many major folk outside of Memphis. The Supremes, like Dana Ross girls, they came to have dinner with us one day. Mike Tyson's wife, Robin Gibbons, she had dinner with us one day. The mayor that's in prison right now.
I think he's out now.
Is he out? He had dinner with us one day. It was just fan. Nancy Wilson. I mean, everybody was with us that day, and I just really got a chance to see the magnitude of Reverend Nettles, even beyond the Mid-South. Yeah,
sure. And I think that's a gift to have the kind of relationships where people have influence beyond your world. Let me tell you something. If the only influence you have is in the world that I'm already a part of, look at this, Dad. Look what I found while you were talking.
That's the picture right there, Rick. That's it. That's it.
Who was this in this picture?
You got Curtis Williams on the left. He's the one who was hosting us in Detroit. And Rick, this guy that's right in front of me, honestly, his name escapes me at the moment because I'm 56, soon to be 57, but he's always traveled in that bunch with us. And then this preacher in the white hat, praise is what I do, praise is what I do. That's William Murphy Sr.
Okay.
And then, of course, that's Reverend Nettles. And the funny part about this is we got suits on like we're going somewhere. We weren't going nowhere.
Hilarious.
We were not going anywhere. All we were doing was getting up. One day we put on swimming clothes. One moment we got on swimming clothes. When we said, let's go eat, we would go back to the hotel, put a suit on. There we go. Right. Look, we're actually on a boat right there.
Wow.
We were actually on a boat. That's Wayne Gady. And man, if this guy in the middle of Curtis and Wayne knew that I forgot his name, he would beat me to death. But that was the trip right there. We were on a retreat right there, Rick.
Wow.
Because I was in trouble.
Wow.
Reverend Nettles called those guys to comfort me.
Wow.
Because I was in trouble.
Wow.
That's the kind of relationship that I have had with my mentors. And Rick, that's the kind of mentor that I strive to be.
Sure. Now speak to this with these gentlemen here.
That's huge. That's huge. Let me talk about that a little bit, Rick.
Go ahead.
This picture, and he's certainly a mentor. This is Reverend J. Alfred Smith, the retired pastor of the Allen Temple Baptist Church in Oakland, California, and he and Reverend Nettles were like best buds. They were best friends. They were both in the Progressive Convention.
Okay.
I was at Reverend J. Alfred Smith's, his wife of 50 years passed, and Reverend Nettles' wife of 55 years passed. And I was on the phone with both of my friends listening to really them cry as they were mourning the passings of their wives.
Sure.
And because I knew that they were both friends and I was in the middle, I invited both of them to come to Tucson to preach. And they both preached in the same service.
Wow.
Reverend J. Alfred Smith preached the gospel story. And Reverend Nettles preached his story.
Wow.
And he told us the story of the wives. And right here, we left church, went to eat dinner, and we were in the mall. And we stopped by one of those places in like a J.C. Penney where they were taking pictures.
Yeah.
And these are the kind of men that these guys were. They pastored thousands of people, but they could take out time. We were in the mall. We took about 25 pictures that day.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's just the kind of relationship.
And so
I had with us.
That's a huge takeaway that I got from you. Not only the ability to learn from people who are larger than life, but notice how you talked about you hosted both of these major preachers at one time. And I remember you telling me, if you're at a table with people who if you're at a table with the rich and the famous, and you can afford to pay for the meal, don't let them pay.
Right.
And then you might have told me that when I was 18, but it has stayed with me at least 10 years. Right. And I have been in places with names of people that I respect who could pay for every morsel of food that they had in the restaurant. And I may be at the table with these individuals, or I may be sitting across the restaurant. But to this day, I have sent for tabs. Sometimes the tab, they shock me a little bit. I have sent for tabs and covered them. I remember Haji Wright, one of my close friends. He and I, we went the first year you took me to Hampton Ministers Conference. You took me to Hampton, and Dr. Maurice Watson was the Hampton preacher that year. And to this day, when you ask me who was my favorite preacher, if they don't let me say you, I'm saying Maurice Watson. I love to hear Maurice Watson preach. And Haji and I could not get to Maurice Watson because there were thousands of preachers at this conference. And he and I went to Outback Steakhouse and got a table. And lo and behold, Maurice Watson and his wife were sitting at the table. And I remember, Dad, that you taught me, if you're in a restaurant with a major preacher that you admire and appreciate, pay for their food. And I told the Haji, we can't let them leave. I said for the waitress, I said, bring us the bill for Maurice Watson and his wife. And while Dr. Watson was in preaching mode, of course, when you're preaching Hampton, that's a lot of pressure, and we didn't want to bother him at his table. So we only went by and said hello. While we were walking by to go to our table, we briefly said hello, didn't even stop. But because we covered his food, that day I met Maurice Watson. We got a picture with him. I was scheduled to preach at his church this year. COVID happened, and I've already gotten the call that I'm scheduled to preach at his church next year. And his young adult pastor is on right now, Kevin Gresham. And so I am amazed at how we learned you taught me how to honor people that we admire. And even scripturally, you qualify to receive the anointing that you honor.
That's right.
And so I love the fact, and I so appreciate having seen you honor people who are larger than life. What is it to pay for somebody's food? What is it to buy somebody a steak dinner? It's a sacrifice, but it is honor. And I think that's so important. So thank you for teaching me that. Lesson learned for everybody watching. If you honor and respect people, show that small tokens go a long way with people who always are the ones with their pocketbook open.
That's right. That's right. And so I call that, when I say different ones, like Reverend Netters taught me kindness. Kindness goes a long way. Real, true, authentic, non-expecting kindness goes a long way. And one of the things I would say about these men that I have named, I've been kind to them, and what I received in return is it quadruples. And when I say what I received, the knowledge, the information, the strength, the spirit, the stance, what you receive in return, the conversation, it's priceless. It's priceless. Yeah.
You know, it is so real. And so I so value that. But let's quickly, in our last 5 minutes, because my whole life, that you have had a ministry of mentorship. You have been a father to the fatherless. But on a serious note, that you have poured into the lives of young preachers and pastors forever. So can you, I can imagine the why, but can you talk about what are the things that you share as a pastor who's pastored congregations more than 35 years with your experience? What are some of the things that you share with young pastors as you mentor them, even to this day?
Pretty much the same things that so I say this. I'm like a salad bowl of all of and I'm not name dropping. I'm telling you the people who poured into my life, and the names I've shared don't even begin to scratch the surface of the older pastors who poured into me. And so I say to young preachers now, because they will say Bunn is dead, and Whalum is dead, and Netters is dead, and Horace Mays, and all of the preachers who poured into me, E.L. McKinney, are dead. I said, well, they're not dead. They don't die. They live in us. And I say, like to you, you still get all of those preachers through me, and all of my mentees, all of my sons in the ministry, and I do have many of them, all of them, they get that. And so what I do is I just try to deposit that. One of the things that my church that I currently serve in asked me once was, what will my legacy be? My legacy be when we were talking about building buildings. Let's build the building and get your name on the building, and that's your legacy. I've never been interested in the legacy of a building. I've been interested in the legacy of watching my preaching go on, one through you, Rickey Jr.
Sure.
And so I have to protect my life now because your name is my name.
Yeah.
And I have to make sure that I make the best decisions that I possibly can, because I'm not only preaching for my name and living for my name, your name is my name. And of course, you got to do right too, because your name is my name.
That's right.
And so I want to see preachers. When I hear you preach, when I hear Arante preach, and that's Pastor Jenkins in Tucson, and when I hear Pastor Lavelle McMichael, and when I hear my newest son is Keith Robinson in Memphis, and when I hear all of the sons and those that I pour into, when I hear them preach, they asked Aretha Franklin, how do you feel when you hear Mariah Carey, or when you hear Whitney Houston, or when you heard even Beyonce? And Aretha says, I know my influence when I hear it.
Yeah.
That's what it's all about for her. And so when I hear you preach, and when I hear all of my sons and daughters in the ministry preach, I know my influence.
Sure.
And when I say preach, that's when I see them mount the pulpit, when I see them prepare sermons, when I see them navigate through both the tough times and the rough times and make it. I know my influence, and I appreciate being able to see what was poured into me being poured into my young stable of preachers. And I know that just like all of these names that I'm naming who have gone on to be with the Lord, when I met them, Rick, they were my age.
Right.
When I met them, they were in their 50s or late 40s. And that was 35 years ago.
Yeah, read the comment that's on the screen right now.
When I say hungry instead of hungry, that's right. We got to call Keita B's name. Keita B, that's my daughter. So,
yeah.
So it's the influence. So my biggest thing is being able to just pour. Jasper Williams said this. He said, we like to get all we can all we get, sit on the lid, and poison the rest. Get all you can all you get, sit on the lid and poison the rest. And when you die, everything you got dies with you.
Yeah.
But when I die, as when these die, they live in me. And when I die, I live in you.
Yeah.
And that's been my biggest contribution, is just being able to help grow young preachers.
I so appreciate, first I see Pastor Walter. Hey, bro, good to see you. I so appreciate that a part of my ministry identity as a result of just being your son is seeing how you have moved and shaped, how you move and shape. I am so inclined to do what we call lifting as you climb.
Lifting as you climb.
There are people now who say, and it's to the glory of God, but it's intentional for me that I'm pouring into the lives of people as I'm growing and maturing as a man and a minister. And I think that's so important. We're closing now because it's 9 o'clock. We're coming back next Sunday, Dad. I just so appreciate the time that we're taking to share lessons learned about leadership and life. Give us a closing word, Dad, and we're closing out.
Hey, guys, I've just learned today that the homegoing service for Reverend Dr. James Nettis is going to be Friday, Saturday, and Sunday coming up in Memphis. And it's going to be an open service. Mount Vernon will hold some people. And so this will probably be one of the largest services. And so I mourn the loss of my mentors, Rick.
Yeah.
I'm mourning the loss, and the older I get, the more mentors I'm losing. And so I say to young preachers, cherish these moments. Cherish these moments. If you get a chance to connect with somebody who is where you want to be one day, connect with them, because we're all passing on. And if you can grab some of what they got, then what they got can live in you, and what you got can live in somebody else.
Yeah, I think that's excellent. It sounds like we may be in Memphis together next weekend, because I'll be home memorializing my great aunt, Evelyn Williams, my shouting auntie. And Rakita's on here, and I say to Rakita and the rest of my cousins, and it's funny, but it's serious. They're going to have to not only take up the mantle of prayer as women in our family,
right,
but they're going to have to start shouting, Dad. I'm telling you.
Nobody can shout like a Pat.
Oh, my God.
Nobody can.
I'm gonna call my cousin Stedman when we get off here. See if I know, COVID, there are so many restrictions. Sure. Rakita and all of my cousins, y'all are gonna have to stop this little cute praise that y'all are doing as millennials
and let it go.
Shout. We're Baptists. We don't do that little syncopated step that the sanctified folks do. We shout. and so there's so many lives that we're memorializing. But again, Dad, thank you for your time tonight. Thank you for your wisdom you've shared. And we'll be back next Sunday if the Lord says the same.
I love you, son. I'll see you soon.
Love you, Dad. Good night.